Hello, my name is Madelyn Parker.
My name is Jordan Tarter.
And this is Lit Chat, where a bunch of English nerds talk about the books that they love. Today we're going to talk about The Handmaid's Tale and modern feminism and kind of how that affects our world today. This might be cut a little short because your girl got a class in 20 minutes. We're all college students making this podcast, but we're going to talk about as much as we can in the time being. So, we had a few thoughts about this before, but I know you, Jordan, you actually took the class where you guys were talking about this. It was a dystopian literature class?
Yeah, it was dystopian and utopian literature. Obviously, the world in A Handmaid's Tale is dystopian, is, post-disaster. And what happens in societies like that is often we are given a picture of the sort of basal instincts of humanity. And The Handmaid's Tale gives us a very grim look at what could happen in a situation. And it really does not bode well for women, obviously. People have read the book, seen the show, and it's not entirely unrealistic. I do remember a lot of men particularly that were really offended by this book. It was written in 1990, it's about to be 30 years old, and it still has sort of a backlash because of the way men are portrayed. And yet, a lot of the symbolism in the book are kind of reflections of, I guess it's like if you were to take like a sort of like a microaggression or some sort of issue we have within gender now and in real life, and you kind of blew it up, that's kind of what kind of goes on in that. And you see it in just kind of the vernacular of the novel.
Right. Well, for anybody who I can't imagine anybody hasn't seen this show, unless you don't want to pay for Hulu, but for anyone who doesn't know, the basic premise of the story is we see life a little bit beforehand as kind of how it is now, with us in society as free as we are and think that we are. And then we jump towards the main character being a member of society solely used for the purpose of reproduction, because a lot of women can't have children. And she's stripped of all of her rights. She has to cover up in this red sack, basically. And it sort of looks at her most intimate thoughts and feelings about having to be in this situation. And there's a lot going on, like Jordan said, that is like basic microaggressive stuff that happens to women today.
And it's global too. Like, a lot of people can look at it and probably make a white feminism argument towards the show, especially because of the perspective of the main protagonist. But really, there's a lot of themes in it that are reflected to this day. There's still countries where women can't walk alone, and the handmaids have to walk in twos with other women, and they can't make eye contact with men, and it's very interesting how things kind of get boiled down in the show. Well, and in the book, really.
Thinking about that, like it's not against the law for me to go anywhere by myself. And I think a lot of people in the United States can say, like, well, we have all the rights that we deserve because, like, no one's telling you can't walk wherever you want. But, like, when you grow up from the age of, like, I don't know, 3 and up, and your father tells you all the time that you should not go outside by yourself, it's like you're being told and set up for a world where people are not going to respect you. Like, people are just telling you that you're not going to be valued by other people for what you're worth, and you should expect to not be valued.
And not only that, but it kind of puts a little bit of fault, because there is being careful, but if something happens, that kind of puts a little bit of fault, because there's the natural sort of reaction of you shouldn't walk alone as a woman. And, there's a lot of things like that in the book within the language. Like, Offred is the name of the protagonist, and in the book they go into detail how everyone gets a name, and it was like of Fred. And they get stripped of their identity, their name, and they put that all into a man. And, people are, talking about how that's so unrealistic and why would anyone ever do that? But we already have last names and surnames. It hasn't been a thing forever, actually. People like to think it has. But we always take the man's surname, and that can be a preference thing. People are doing that less now, but I mean, it is a tradition. And even though, and there's nothing wrong with liking it, there's nothing wrong with wanting to, to take a man's name if that's what you're into. But it definitely is a male-focused And just, like, we have little average everyday things we say, like, mankind, woman is of man. We are a, I guess, derivative of the term. And so, really, there is a lot of terminology in modern-day society, in real life, that is male-focused. And what this book does is it makes it kind of absurd, and I really like when it's done well, taking absurdism in a way and using it to kind of magnify certain social issues. It's kind of like the importance of being earnest for modern day feminism. It takes things and it makes them so ridiculous that you have to look at it.
Well, I almost feel like it's definitely a response to how, like, society responds to women pushing back against traditions like that. Because, like, when my mom got married, she considered, keeping her last name or, like, doing a joint last name. And she decided not to do it because it was just too much work. It was too much trouble. Yeah. And, like, the fact that, like, you would get so much grief over doing that is ridiculous. That, like, the response to choosing not to take a man's last name is ridiculous. It is.
And here's the thing. I understand wanting a whole family to have the same last name, wanting the kids to have the same last name, and hating hyphens. And there are families that I know that would take, the woman's last name in a heteronormative, kind of structure, nuclear family kind of situation. But the thing is, there are so many men that I've met, not all men, obviously, hashtag not all men, but who are so opposed to the idea of taking her name. And, we wonder why. And it's like, oh, so my name can travel down, like my family will be so upset. Well, what about hers? Where are we tracing back the lineage for women,
Yeah.
And I find that such a presence in society today. And another thing in the book that I see kind of blown up is the concept of the, like, Aunt Lydia's. I think that's what it is. Like, it's been a while since I've read it, but Lydia. And it's the older women that train the handmaids and the younger women on their new place in life and how they should behave, how they should, treat their master and his wife. And it's, it's just another way of reflecting how in society we even have older generations and current generations of women who kind of contribute to that sort of patriarchal authority. I mean, it's why it's called man and wife. And I do like that in a lot of marriage ceremonies, they're now saying, like, husband and wife. That's great. But it is that inherent kind of hierarchy of gender. And it's a very gendered system, and we're, implementing those social structures through a lot of women. A lot of women are contributing to this structure because, I don't know, tradition, maybe they like it and they don't see that it should be a choice. It really makes you think in the novel. Right.
Well, especially because, like, you'd think, I mean, I feel like I'm going to say this so many times, but the idea is that we're not as oppressed as we once were. But if you choose to deviate from these societal norms, it's associated with discordance or unhappiness. Like, if you don't have the same last name as your husband, people assume that you are not happy together or that you are divorced. Or, like, if you choose to fight wanting to be the subservient wife, people think that you are angry and aggressive and unhappy with your relationship, when instead maybe you're like, maybe the man in this relationship should know how to cook a meal so that if I die, he doesn't starve. Like,
and, here's the thing. We have come far, though. I mean, but I like to call it the quality of equality. Like, when are we equal enough? And it's obviously like, you're only equal when you're right there with them. But we keep saying we're achieving equality, but until we are actually on the same, level of really equity, understanding women and how women, function within society and how we've kind of been, I guess, conditioned and understanding that and trying to kind of put us all on equal terms. I feel like, we do have a right to seeking a further, I guess, higher quality of treatment.
Right.
Even though, obviously, we're not being forced to wear red capes and into weird, sex rituals with consensual rape, and I'm not, forced to, like, stay in a house all day and not allowed to make eye contact with people. There are women that do have to face that in certain countries. That's not happening here, obviously, but there are still systems. There's still language. Language really shapes our society. There's still a lot of, in my opinion, archaic practices, and you can be okay with them,
right?
And you can enjoy them, but at the same time, just because you might love your gender role that you've assigned yourself, we need to stop assigning it to women as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is to understand where these things come from as their tradition, what they used to mean, and how we have to reinterpret them for the future and for the time, the modern time right now, that they shouldn't apply to everyone if we're not going to fully practice what they used to mean.
Yeah.
Or ignore what they, even if you're not paying attention to whether or not you're practicing it the way that it was in olden times. If you're going to ignore what it meant back then, then you have to, reevaluate what it means to you. But secondly, something that you mentioned, that, just because we don't have to cover our whole body in, a giant red cape, but it does happen to other women, that, a product of, having, privilege is that our responsibility of having privilege is to raise the bar of the standard of how women should be treated, so that everyone knows that this is how women should be treated. But then one step further is not only to get that standard for ourselves, but to get that standard up for everyone else too.
And I understand that the Handmaid's Tale, there's only one, in my mind, really prevalent male figure in the book who does try to offer some sort of kindness while he is, lording over her. And it's and it kind of makes me think of men that give a little, that are, I'm kind to women, I'm a nice guy, but you're still not going to see her or treat her as equal just because you treat someone kindly. And I also want to say, we are talking about a book that deals with the concept of feminine oppression in society, but I also like to extend feminism to men, because what it is it's equality between the sexes. And, that applies across the board, all genders on the spectrum. It's about that equality. And what's interesting is there's a very lacking in a presence of, I guess, kindness for men and softness for men, and allowing men to kind of express themselves in ways that are non-traditional. And that's kind of reflected in the book as well, because of the selection of who gets to have a wife and a handmaid.
Right.
There are some men that are just, going to be guards because they're not seen as fit to be that. And, it comes with money, status, power, fitness as a person. And I feel like a lot of what that is saying, and it's something that's reflected in society, is we don't allow men to be the vulnerable character. And I'm not saying that wouldn't be a reflection of society if that was in the book, which is what the book is supposed to be. It's, that blown up picture. But I feel like it also says something about how we hold these standards for men of you need to be the one with more money, the wealthier, you need to hold the higher position. And while it sounds nice, I personally would love to have, a ton of money and maybe some power and, bodily autonomy would be great. But at the same time, not everyone wants that. And, we talk a lot about how women don't always want that, but it's what about the men that don't want that? What about the men that would like to be the caretakers and maybe, be the person at home making dinner, taking care of kids, the more nurturing, the soft, the little spoon. I mean, it's fascinating, because what these books do is, through our mirror of females being oppressed, female oppression, we give, or feminine oppression, I should say, we also give ourselves a side of it that actually kind of puts a bit of an oppressive tone to the other side.
Yeah. Well, talking about how men are not allowed to be gentle or kind or those are traditional feminine qualities. And if you were to allow men to value feminine qualities, it would be impossible for them to see women as unequal if they were going to value the qualities that they traditionally push down and also ascribe to women, because not all women have all of those qualities of gentleness. But the fact that they're pushed into that role so that they can be oppressed.
And here's the thing. I hate gender qualifiers. I really, really do. Because across the board, we really are put on a spectrum of not only, where you are in yourself and what you choose for yourself, where you want to fit socially in those constructs, but we impose them as a level of, hey, if you want to be this, you have to be a certain amount of feminine, you have to be a certain amount of masculine. And yet being feminine is almost always seen as a weaker and negative aspect, because it's shown a lot in the wives in the story. I can't remember, not the Marthas, what are the wives called? I can't remember for the life of me.
I don't remember either, but I mean, we both know what we're talking about.
Yes, and they have to be, the chaste, right, and the holy, and it's very interesting because they're respected and revered for not having sex and being so, they're masters of the home, but they're feminine, and it's that kind of same thing where even though they're considered more respected than handmaids and whatnot, being feminine in many cases seems to be the biggest of insults to a masculine person.
Right. Well, what's interesting is, and I remember many times where the wife is very aggressive to the handmaid.
Yeah, and in the book, she's definitely more aggressive than in the series, and
which,
not as young.
Traditionally, aggression is, ascribed to men. But the thing
unless it's towards other women.
Unless it's towards other women. So something that you've mentioned the word power, but, like, the reason why it's so difficult for people, and reasons why, like, traditionalists get very angry about the quote feminist agenda unquote is because nobody is talking about what is really at stake here. People want to say it's about sex, it's about desire, it's about morality, but it isn't. It's about power. And rape culture is never about desire or like who wants to do what or who decided to do what. It's about power. Yeah. Where, like, if the husband is kind to the handmaid and teaches her how to read and takes her out with him, he still has power over her. And just because he's treating her better than he would other handmaids, she is still in a position that is lower than him. And he can still, she is always in a state of fear. She doesn't know what to do. She has to do what he tells her to do, or she'll be outed. The consequences are higher for her. And if people actually, looked at that in the face, truthfully, and said that, in this situation, this woman has no right to choose anything for herself, even if she does have it better than other women, even if she has a better relationship with this man than other women, she can't choose anything, and she's still at the mercy of him, right?
And what's interesting is we need to stop making power a masculine term. Mm-hmm. That is why we are having such an issue with accepting women in leadership positions, and if we accept them, we think, oh, it's because they're women. People, wanted to see a woman in leadership, and she got it because she's a woman. No, she probably got it because she's qualified, and in a lot of ways, it's because we have this, old linguistic perception of power being masculine, because for a time, men, especially with the invention of the plow and whatnot, doing physical labor genetically, having higher bone density or muscle mass, power was equal to a physical stance. But now power means way more than that. There are some extremely powerful people that are, not the most fit or, large. And what we need to do is we need to take that out of the masculine, side of what our gender perception is. And that's a lot of what The Handmaid's Tale is kind of showing us, is that we perceive masculine and feminine in different lights because of how we have placed them socially. And that is something that it's kind of perpetrated through a lot of leadership, formats and a lot of religious issues, because one, a lot of the words, a lot of this vocabulary in The Handmaid's Tale is religious. It's very much centered around religion. Specifically Christianity in a lot of ways. And I find that we as a society can learn from a book like that, because we do impose a lot of religious morality onto women in order to, I don't know, a lot of it really is to oppress. And there's a way to use religion to uplift, and there's a way to believe what you believe and kind of extend that power. But there are churches that don't even allow women in leadership.
Right. Well, if you wanted to say, like, oh, The Handmaid's Tale is archaic and not relevant today, you could argue that faith is not very prevalent in the United States. Mm-hmm. That's only, like, a certain part of the United States. So the geography of this country is so large that you forget about the Bible Belt and how integrated religious belief is in people's lives, and how much it controls what we do, that it is an institution, and the laws, like, dictate what way that people choose to live their lives.
And the thing is, I feel like people are much more prone to obeying their religion and their higher power and what they interpret it to be. Because I will say I've read, the verses that people try to point out in religion that say women shouldn't be leaders, and it's usually just like Paul said to be quiet during church or something, to a specific group. And it's interesting because what you interpret it as and what your denomination determines it as is something that I feel people will listen to more than laws. I feel like if someone doesn't agree with the law, like speeding, it seems very silly and simple, but, if you can get away with it, if you need to do it, like, you'll go, because the only thing that is kind of setting that moral standard for you is, like, if you get caught, you'll have to pay money. But when it comes to, divinity, people see that has a much higher risk. And what that does is it implements whatever oppression that specific religion sets.
Right.
And that is a lot of kind of the theocratic elements of The Handmaid's Tale, is that the moment you make something about God, the moment you say, hey, you're supposed to be this way in life, and this is about, something higher. This is what, this is your place. This is your calling. A lot of people say, like, you are meant to be in the home. He's meant to be over you. He leads you. And if that's how you interpret your religion, that's fine. But the moment that we implement those things in a system, that's when we get lost.
I want to say one more, because we're running out of time, just because, your girl got to go to class. But
we got like 3 minutes.
I will say one thing that I think people forget a lot. All of Christianity can be very oppressive to women. And that's an opinion. That is my opinion. But as a kid that was raised by 2 parents who have degrees in seminary, have masters in seminary, Jesus had whores as disciples.
Like, he hung out with prostitutes.
And he never, ever in the Bible does it say that he asked them to stop being whores. Like, he asks them to follow him, but they don't...
How they're making their money.
They don't become something else. They stop doing what they're doing in the world, but they don't become something else, and they are that identity as they follow Jesus. And he often says that they are sinners, and that is a staple of the people that follow Jesus Christ. So, I mean, if you're going to say that women have to do this and this and this and this, then you have to condemn the kind of people that Jesus hung out with.
And you have to wonder, what if a lot of our religious works were written from a female perspective? What if women wrote, their own perspective on the times?
My favorite Bible story is the one about Ruth, because she sleeps with a man to get financial security. She does.
It's brilliant.
I mean, we don't have time to go into that. I could totally talk about that later, and you could totally call bullshit on me, but, like, I'm just saying, a lot of the women in the Bible are not squeaky clean.
And it's again, at the Handmaid's Tale, it's who's exploiting who? The man that is paying you for sex, or the man that wants something from you, or the woman that gives that,
right,
or exchanges that, right, or gets the money. And that's really just a whole nother level of where that goes into this, and just the themes and how that reflects today. Right. But we really do, it's so interesting. It's just kind of like that expectation of gratification for men from women, and how it's sort of settled in because it is a moral thing. Like, a lot of the Lydias would say, like, hey, this is your duty to society. This is your place.
Well, that's all we have time to talk about for now. Leave a comment below about what you think. Maybe we can continue this dialogue online, or anywhere where you're listening to this, whether it's YouTube or if you've seen it on Twitter or whatever. This has been Lit Chat. I'm Madelyn Parker.
I'm Jordan Tarter.
And we'll see you next time. Well, we'll hear you next time. Or maybe not. I don't know.